Hello, everybody. This is Sam Carchidi from Philly Hockey Now. Welcome to our 13th episode of our Broad Street Bullcast, and we have a lot of positives to talk about, and uh, not only with the Flyers, but the city of Philadelphia. Maybe we should call this the Philadelphia story because the Phillies, the Eagles are doing great things out there, and the Philadelphia Flyers, believe it or not, did great things in their first two games. And that is the biggest surprise. I don't think anybody expect them to be 2-0. The competition they faced so far in the two games, the New Jersey Devils and the Vancouver Canucks, two teams that missed the playoffs last year. But hey, 2-0 is 2-0. They have a tough road trip coming up, but the Flyers are doing a lot of good things. They've overcome deficits in both Game 1 and Game 2. Down 1-0 in Game 1 against the Devils, came back, won 5-2. Down 2-0 in Game 2, beat the Vancouver Canucks 3-2. Vancouver now blew a 3-0 lead in Game 1. That was in Edmonton, and the Canucks blew a 2-0 lead in Game 2 against the Flyers. And, the Flyers coming back from deficits, and not that they're insurmountable, 1-0 and 2-0, but last year, this is something that did not happen too often. So a real good sign, and I think a lot of that is because of John Tortorella. He has them conditioned. He has them believing in themselves. Much better attitude this year. You can see it in their body language. And as I said, a lot of positives. To me, the number one positive has been Ivan Provorov and Tony DeAngelo. Provorov was injured for most of the preseason, and he and DeAngelo, who, of course, was acquired in the offseason in a deal with the Carolina Hurricanes, and they only had one game together in the exhibition season, but yet they have not skipped a beat. So far, they are combined +9 in two games. They've combined for 6 points. DeAngelo had his first goal as a Flyer. Of course, DeAngelo is from South Jersey and then moved to South Philadelphia. He's a local kid, and he had over 200 relatives and friends at Game 1, and I don't know how many at Game 2, but DeAngelo has stepped right in with Provorov. Really surprising to see them develop this chemistry so quickly. Even Ivan Provorov, I talked to him after Game 1. He said he thought it would take 4, 5, 6 games before they got some chemistry together, but it's happened a lot quicker than anybody thought, even them. So to me, that's the number one positive. The number two positive is probably Travis Konecny. Konecny, of course, had a disappointing year last season, had just 16 goals. And, he's a guy that they're really counting on. He's a young veteran. They need him to step his game up, score between 25 and 30 goals. And so far, so good. Because of injuries, he's been on the top line with Kevin Hayes and Scott Lawton. And as I said, 3 goals over 2 games. He had 2 goals in the opener and then 1 goal against Vancouver. And, last year he had goals in each of the first 3 games. So he got off to a quick start last year, too, but then faded and really went through some down times. He only scored 13 goals the entire rest of the season. So a great start for TK, but he is motivated to keep it up and to be a lot more consistent than he was last year. Positive number 3, Carter Hart. Now, Carter Hart, you'll remember, did not play at all in the preseason because of an injury, and a lot of people, myself included, thought he'd be a little rusty, and he probably was a little rusty in the first period of Game 1. Since then, he's been very good. He probably let up a goal we'd like back in Game 2, but overall, Carter Hart has been excellent. He has a 2.00 goals against average, an off-the-charts .940 save percentage in the 2 games. And Carter Hart, he was a little bit of a question mark before the season, not because of his talent, but because, he did not play. And it's difficult for a guy you would think, to come right in and not be, in the real deal. And he said he tried to get as many reps during practice, and he tried to duplicate game conditions. But it's really hard to duplicate game conditions, even in an inter-squad scrimmage. It's just not the same. But so far, so good with Carter Hart. And there are a lot of other positives. Another one, I think, is Noah Cates. He's playing a new position, playing center. He's a natural left winger First time he's played center since his college year at Minnesota Duluth. There's going to be some growing pains, no question about it. But, I thought he was even stronger in Game 2 than he was in Game 1. He was 9 for 18, so he was 50% in faceoffs. And he played a little over 20 minutes, so you can tell John Tortorella had a lot of trust in him to be on the ice. And right now, he's centering the second line because of the Couturier injury. He's centering the second line, and right now he has Joel Farabee on his left and Wade Allison on his right. And I talked to Noah the other day, and he said that he's getting some tips from his brother Jackson, who is a natural center, on how to play the position.
Yeah, I need to be better. Just the little things, the face-offs, staying on the right side of the puck and of different guys. So I'll definitely be watching him tomorrow. And all the centers, all the guys, they're really good players, and I just need to learn some little things that they do so well.
That was Noah Cates, and Cates. They will be the two centers unless there's a move made. But it looks like they'll be two of the four centers when the Flyers go on this very, very tough 3-game road trip. They start out on the road on Tuesday in Tampa Bay against the Lightning, one of the best teams in the NHL, despite their 1-2 start. Then they play in Florida against the Panthers, and everybody knows what a high-scoring team the Florida Panthers are. They're 2-0, and then they go to Nashville, which is a trendy pick to finish near the top in their Western Conference, and they're off to a 2-2 start. So it's a difficult trip for the Flyers, and especially Tampa Bay, because this is the Lightning's first home game. They started with 3 road games. They lost in Madison Square Garden to the Rangers 3-1. They beat the Columbus Blue Jackets 5-2. Then they were bombed by the Pittsburgh Penguins 6-2. So they're going to be a very hungry team, and this is an early prove-it game for the Flyers. And in fact, all 3 games will be prove-it games. I think if you come back with 3 points out of these 3 games, you'd be very, very happy. Just a note, it seems like the Flyers and Phillies are playing almost identical schedules. The Flyers this week coming up play Tuesday, Wednesday, and Saturday, and the Phillies are playing all three days or nights as the Flyers are. So the Flyers, hard to believe that they're 2-0, but as I said, this is a difficult stretch for them, and let's see how they can do under John Tortorella on the road. They were not a good road team last year, but this team has a different look this year with John Tortorella. They just seem like all the players so far, I know it's early, have the mentality that they have to show Torts what they have, what they can do, and Torts has publicly said that, we're going to have a shuttle between Philadelphia and Allentown almost all year. And the meaning to that is that if you don't perform, especially the younger guys, you could be going back to Allentown. And, we've seen Cam York there. We've seen a lot of movement already back and forth between Allentown and Philadelphia. So just something to keep your mind on as we move forward. We'll be back after a short break with your great questions. Stay tuned. Again, this is the Broad Street Bullcast. Welcome back to our Broad Street Bullcast, and we're going to go right into our question and answer period. First question comes from Left Coast Flyers. He asks, who do you think misses ice time when Sean Couturier and Cam Atkinson return to the lineup? Good question. And also remember, Owen Tippett is out right now too, so keep an eye on that for the future too. I think the guys that will come out right now, Ali Lixel came in for Game 2. They recalled him from Allentown, and Jackson Cates, who was also recalled from the Phantoms, I think he will go out. The way I see it eventually going, I think Sean Couturier will be on the top line with Farabee and Atkinson as his wingers. Kevin Hayes would drop down to number 2 with Scott Lawton, Travis Konechny as his wingers. Morgan Frost at 3 with JVR and Noah Cates. And I think, again, when Tippett comes back, you'll see him on that line because that line had some pretty good chemistry last year, the Cates, Frost, and Tippett line. And I see the fourth line probably with Lazinski centering Delore and Wade Allison. So Allison right now has jumped all the way up to the second line because of all the injuries. And but I see him dropping down to number 4 probably. And again, when Owen Tippett comes back, you're going to have some tough decisions to make because, I don't really know who comes out right now. But you can also have an injury, and we'll see how that plays out. But the odd men out look like Lixel and Jackson Cate. Second question comes from Luke, and he says, he talks about Gary Bettman. Gary Bettman, of course, the NHL commissioner, and he was at the Flyers' opening game win over the Jersey Devils, and and I actually asked him about the low attendance figure, and if he was concerned about that. The Flyers' attendance last year was they averaged a little over 16,000, which was their lowest home attendance average in nearly 50 years. And Luke asked, what is Comcast Spectacor doing about this, about trying to get more fans here and trying to rectify the situation? Well, Comcast Spectacor spent over $300 million in upgrades and renovations. But, Luke, I think you and all the fans know that the number one thing they can do is put a top-notch product on the ice. And they're working on that. I mean, the good thing is right now they're playing a lot of young kids. More than half the team is 25 and under. And, I liked the other day, I mentioned Ollie Lixel, not that was a major move, but I like the fact they brought up a young 23-year-old kid. There were other players, Zach McEwen they could have brought up, who's been around for a while, but I like the fact they're giving the young kids a look-see, and you have to give them credit. They're trying to rebuild, and I wish Fletcher would have done more in the offseason, picked up more draft picks, maybe picked up a couple more prospects, but at least with what they have, they're trying to develop these players, and that's a positive sign. Third question comes in from Tim Frey. Tim asks, why hasn't Zach McEwen been called up and given a shot? Well, I kind of answered that in the previous question. I think right now they want to play the young kids and just see what they have. And if you remember, Ronnie Attard was handled pretty easily in a preseason fight. I don't think they liked the fact that Zach McEwen was on the ice at the time and didn't step up for Ronnie Attard, who was clearly overmatched by about 35 pounds. And I could be wrong, but, to me, I don't think that sat well with a lot of people. And John Tortorella actually alluded to that without naming names. He said he wishes that Ronnie Attard, didn't have to defend himself there. But I think that was kind of a message to Zach McEwen, and maybe that has something to do with it. But believe me, you will see there will be injuries, and you will see Zach McEwen here at some point this year. Next question comes from Scooby Moon. He says, can they go 2-80 and bomb for Bedard? Well, obviously you're asking in jest, but can they be in the run? They could be in the running for Bedard or any of the top 3 generational talents. Again, Bedard is not the only guy who is considered a generational talent, and but let's put it bluntly, it's going to be tough for them to finish in the bottom 3, but it's possible. A lot depends on Couture when he comes back. A lot depends on the injury situation. I really believe Arizona is going to be hard to beat for that bottom spot. San Jose will probably also be in the mix. But, the Flyers, I don't expect them to get a top 3, but, they could be they could get one of the top 5 picks. And, of course, they got Cutter Gauthier at number 5 last year, and he looks like a terrific prospect. Next question. This comes from the one who knows, and he has discussed the truth behind Ryan Ellis. Well, Ryan Ellis, of course, is a defenseman who had a pelvic injury and played only 4 games last year, played very well, and he looked like the perfect complement to Ivan Provorov, but unfortunately, he did not recover in the offseason. he was optimistic towards the end of last year that he'd be able to play the beginning of the season. And Chuck Fletcher, of course, right before this season started, said that he would not be surprised if he misses the entire season this year. My big question is, if it's taken this long for a recovery, why hasn't he had surgery to try to fix the situation? That's the big question. Every time you ask Chuck Fletcher about possible surgery, he says, not right now. Right now, we're not thinking that way. We're not thinking that's an option. But he always gives the impression that that could be an option down the road. And so, to me, that's the puzzling part. But believe me, Ryan Ellis is working hard. He's there skating. He's working. I shouldn't say skating, but he's working out at the Flyers practice arena in Voorhees almost every day. The guy works hard. I thought it was really unfair. The fans booed him when he was introduced at the opener before New Jersey. And to Ryan's credit, he smiled and just shook it off. But, it's got to hurt because this is a guy, believe me, he's working hard to come back. And hopefully at some point this season he can. But, an injury is an injury. The guy doesn't want to be out. He wants to be in there, and he would make a big difference on this Flyers team, no question. Next question comes from Ryan Arrow, and this is one of my favorite ones, if not my favorite one of the week. He says, so far it seems like the Flyers have the ceiling of a bubble playoff team without tanking and receiving a top 5 pick. Is there any reason we won't be stuck in mediocrity? And by that he means not good enough to win a cup or challenge for a cup, and not bad enough to get a top 3 pick. It's a great question, Ryan, and I think that's exactly what's going to happen. I think this team will end up with 73, 75, 76 points. They won't get a top 3, probably not a top 4 pick. They might get a 5 to 7 in there, 5 to 8. But again, a lot depends. A lot depends on what happens with the injury situation. But it's a frustrating situation right now. So that's why you hope the Flyers are able to develop some of these young kids, and that the young veterans, Provorov and Konechny, 2 guys, by the way, really stepped up in the first 2 games, that they can take another step towards being all-stars. Let's face it, they're at a crossroads in their career. So, because I believe just what you said is going to happen. I don't think there'll be a cup challenger. I don't really think there'll be a playoff challenger. I hope I'm proved wrong. And I don't think they'll be able to get a top 3 pick. So you hope you develop kids. You hope you make a shrewd pick if you get 6 or 7 and add that to Cutter Gauthier, who I think will be here next year. And maybe you have something. But good question, Ryan. Next question comes from Chris Mayer, and Chris says, this is a fun one, he says. What's your favorite regular season game you ever covered? Well, that's easy because in 2010, the last game of the regular season, this game meant everything. And how often does a season come down to an 82nd game? Flyers and Rangers, winner take all, winner makes the playoffs, loser goes home. It went to a shootout. The great Henrik Lundqvist, who will be a first ballot Hall of Famer, was in the nets for the Rangers. Brian Boucher in the net for the Flyers. You figure advantage Rangers. The Flyers get shootout goals from Giroux and Danny Briere, and Brian Boucher outduels Henrik Lundqvist, and the Wells Fargo Center went crazy. And, of course, the Flyers, that was a magical season. They kind of underachieved for most of that year. They sneak into the playoffs literally on the last day of the season, and you know the rest. They beat New Jersey. They beat the Montreal Canadiens, and, of course, they got by Boston. They were down 3-0, and they get by them. That was in the actually quarterfinals, and the Stanley Cup semifinals is when they beat Montreal, and they got to the Stanley Cup Finals against Chicago, and end up losing in 6 hard-fought games. But what a run. I actually thought that the Flyers were a team of destiny that year, because when you come back from a 3-0 deficit against Boston and trailing 3-0 in Game 7 and getting into the playoffs in Game 82. It just seemed like they were a team of destiny. I really thought they were going to win the Stanley Cup that year, but the Chicago Blackhawks had other ideas. But yeah, Chris, that would be, appreciate the question. That would be my favorite regular season game I covered. I've also covered some great Phillies regular season games. I covered Tommy Green's no-hitter. I was fortunate enough to be there in Montreal. And I covered an NL East clinching victory in Pittsburgh. Mariano Duncan hit a grand slam in that game, and the Phillies clinched the NL East title. That was a memorable game. I covered a a game that ended. I think it was 4:50 in the morning. That, of course, was Mitch Williams drove in the winning run against the San Diego Padres. So I've covered a lot of crazy baseball games as well. The next and last question comes from Cord Blaney. He asked, any clue how long Owen Tippett and Cam Atkinson will be out? They're very key players to the Flyers. I think Atkinson was penciled in as a top line right winger. Owen Tippett is a third line right winger, and this, I think, they're counting on him to have a breakthrough season. To me, I think Atkinson will be back before him. I could be wrong, but just based on clues that John Tortorella has been dropping, he actually thought that Cam Atkinson, who he coached, of course, with Columbus, he thought he'd be ready for the opener. He said that 3 different times, but that wasn't the case, and so they're going to err on the side of caution with him. Now, we do know it's an upper body injury for Owen Tippett. The Flyers aren't telling us exactly what it is, but it could be a concussion based on based on the hit. Again, I don't want to jump to conclusions, but if it is, I think he'll probably be out longer than Cam Atkinson. They need them back. They need both of them back because their right wing spot right now is kind of in flux. Like right now, you have Travis Konechny as the number 1 right winger. Wade Allison has moved all the way up to number 2, and he's off to a promising start. Tanner Laczynski is the number 3 right wing. He's a guy that fought just to get a job in camp and was the 4th line center to begin the season. And they had to recall, as I said, Ollie Lixel as the 4th line right winger. So they're kind of low at that position, and they're going to need some help. So hopefully we'll get Atkinson and Tippett back sooner rather than later. I really appreciate all the great questions, and I want to thank my producer, my great son Sam, and want to especially thank everybody for listening. And again, the Flyers play Tuesday, Wednesday, and Saturday this upcoming week. Big games in Tampa Bay, Florida, and Nashville. And as the late, great Gene Hart was fond of saying, good night and good hockey.